Hello, here we are, yet another walkie-talkie. Weather's alright, it's a bit cold, but it's not raining, it's very still. I'll take that. Anyway, I have a couple of things I want to talk about today, and yeah, got a couple of squirrels on the fence there. Oh, we got three, gathering in number. Oh, they're kicking off. They're like, oh. Right, it's my fence. Yep. I think this, yeah, he's like, get off it, my fence. Get off my fence. That's funny. Anyway, things I want to chat about today. The next gen of games consoles. It's a subject I have already spoken about, but the sort of rumour of of Sony saying they're delaying the PlayStation 6 for another couple of years because of the prices of RAM. I want to talk about that, and really the price of the next gen of tech going forward anyway. Not just about PlayStation, but in general. And lights on. I've seen one before. Anyway, that, and I want to touch briefly as well upon this upcoming Bond game. Somebody from the development team, the guns flapping about changing Bond for modern day audiences, which, bad move in my view, because we're going to talk about this phrase, modern audiences, and why I despise it, and why it's just become a phrase that's used and misused. Because in theory, like the word pre-order, in my view, it's a nonsense phrase. And also in the sense of video games, it's not an audience. It's an interactive participant, not an audience. But we'll get to that. So, buckle in. Dear God, people really are disgusting. Just looking at the litter around here. When there's a bin at the front, bin in the middle, and a bin at the end, and people still throw the bloody rubbish on the floor. They disgust me. They should bring back public flogging. Look at it. Anyway. We'll continue. I'm on a bit of a rant mode today. So, yeah. So we're gonna get into it. And I will, I'll see you all in the park. Anyhow, let's get into the main topic of this walk. And that is, do we need the next gen of consoles? This PS6, whatever they call the next Xbox, do we even need it? They say Sony have been talking about delaying it with a view to the fact that the sudden increase in the price of RAM. RAM has always been relatively expensive, but obviously, I remember a few years ago, back in the sort of late 90s, the metric over here was like £1 a megabyte. Well, of course, you've got gigabytes of RAM now, don't you? So, I remember having 128 megabytes of RAM in one of my early PCs, and it worked out, it was about 130 quid it cost me, so it was roughly about that. But you're talking gigabytes, which is obviously considerably more, so it's never been massively cheap, but obviously it's gone up in price, and Sony's like, well, as opposed to even make the PS6 affordable, they are pushing back a potential release window to 2027, 2028, which is either next year or the year after. I don't think they need to bother with that, to be honest. I have a launch PS5. Games still look great on it. They still play great on it. I genuinely do not see the need for another console. I'm still waiting for the full potential of this current generation to be realised, to be honest. And how much better do we want games to look? I mean, they look pretty great now, in fairness. And the important thing is games. All that power, that means nothing. Absolutely nothing. What we want are games. And that's not been the big takeaway from this generation. As I say, there's a big shift towards more indie games, which tend to, on average, require less power. We've seen a few high-profile failures in terms of game sales. That would lead me to think that it's not necessarily better graphics, higher resolutions that people want. What people are really after, better games. And I wonder whether or not there's even a point to the PS6 or a point to the next Xbox when in my view, the full potential of what's already out there isn't being realised anyway. It's we're not getting the full-on experience at this moment in time in terms of games. We've not had a new Elder Scrolls game. God alone knows when that's coming out. You know, we've had nothing that I've seen that I would go there and go, oh, you know, that's really taxing this console. That's really pushing it. Now, I'm no expert. Game devs out there might be saying, well, you know, we're having to compromise this, that, and the other, but are you? In what area? I'm playing a game at the moment, the Avatar game from a couple of years ago. It looks fantastic. It's great lighting, lovely visuals. You're spending a lot of time, you know, running around Pandora in this very lush environment that I would imagine is quite intensive graphically. And it looks great. That's from 2 years ago. The Final Fantasy VII remake Intergrade that I've been playing again. What's that, from a couple of 3 years ago, maybe even a bit more. In fact, that did come out on the PS4. The PS5 edition was sort of an upgrade to that. It looks amazing. It looks amazing. How much better would it look on a PS6? Would the human eye even be able to see what the differences are? When you need videos or still screenshots to point out the differences, you then start to wonder, well, what's the point? What is the point? I mean, it was only this year that we had a FIFA game, although it's now FC, called FC, that was exclusive to this generation. What was it? Oh no, it was the F1 game. The F1 game. And to be perfectly honest with you, I wasn't necessarily blown away. Was the FC game exclusive to the current gen? I don't know. I know it's got the Switch 2 edition, which is obviously current gen, or, you know, what do we call that, next gen? It's pretty much current gen technology though, isn't it? But did it come out on the PS4 and Xbox One series of consoles? I don't know. I straight up don't know. But even whether it did or it didn't, I have it on the PS5 and it's not amazing. It's not bowled me over. It's still as janky as all hell. Glitches everywhere. You know, when it cuts to your manager on the touchline and his clothes are glitching through each other, it's not very good, is it? It doesn't scream polished. It doesn't scream next gen or current gen or even last gen. It's the kind of thing I would have expected to see in the early days of polygons on the PlayStation 1, to be honest, while the people were still getting to grips with the technology. Not something that, you know, is supposed to be current gen, modern day superpower console. Don't want to get stuck behind somebody stopping and starting. So, yeah, just sitting and thinking about that for a while and just being like, well, you know what? We're not even perfected this current generation. We've not even maximised this. Do we really want another generation? I don't think so. And I don't really see people crying out for it either. Because we all know it's going to be massively expensive even without a RAM shortage, or, you know, an inflation of RAM prices, blame that on whatever you want, but it's the thing, and it won't go away, by the way. You know, they'll be around for a while yet. But I don't see people going, oh, I can't wait for the next gen. I think what most people are is, I can't wait for this game. And we're not getting that. We're not getting that at all. So, you know, it does beg the question, doesn't it? You know, what are we doing? Waiting around for this next gen? Is that going to fix these? But no, it won't. Every gen promises these things and never delivers. And it's a very simple reason, is it's down to the games, not the hardware. If you look at previous generations, you've always got to that point, like on the PS3, when you got Grand Theft Auto 5, I think it was, towards the end of that life cycle, you could see it was struggling. Was it the PS? Yeah, it was. And then it came out on the PS4 and it was a lot better. You know, the frame rates were a lot better. The visuals were a lot better. And then, of course, they re-released it again on the PS5 and the Xbox Series X. They just did another makeover and it looked a bit better. But it wasn't quite the jump from PS3 to PS4 in terms of the visuals, is what I'm saying. The increments are getting much smaller with each generation. And I've said that I wouldn't be focusing more on the visual side of things. I would be focusing more on how you're delivering the game. I'd be focusing more on larger downloads. That's what I would be doing. Making the file sizes smaller, making the requirements less for that side of things. I would be making sure that how games are stored aren't consuming vast amounts of data on a hard drive that is ultimately resulting in the console running out of storage space. Dear God, I've had to uninstall and move around games just to get the Final Fantasy VII remaster on there. I've had to uninstall a couple of games. I have an additional 1 terabyte hard drive on the PS5. I've got nearly 2 terabytes. It didn't work out that way, obviously. It's probably about 1.6 when you take out the ridiculous amounts of space required to run a very basic operating system, which the PS5 has. You know, when you remove all of those elements, you know, you're not left with a huge amount of space, are you? Which is ridiculous. Operating systems on that level should not be taking up all of that amount of space. A lot of it's just bloatware and crap that could be removed very, very easily. It would also make the system run more efficiently. There's a lot of stuff that's piled in there that the end user doesn't need. I mean, if you think about it, not that many years ago, games consoles pretty much didn't have operating systems at all. They had a very basic screen, but that was it. Go back to the Mega Drive and Super Nintendo era. They didn't even have that. If you got the consoles that didn't have built-in games, when you turn them on, they did nothing, pretty much. But they were efficient. Nowadays, with all this nonsense that they've piled in there, you've got gigs and gigs and gigs of data being consumed off a hard drive that is completely unnecessary. In addition to all of that, you've got all of, when you install a game update, needing extra space on the hard drive. If I've got 20 gig on the hard drive free and a game update is 15 gig, why do I need nearly twice the amount of space for the update? I don't. It's inefficient. It's badly designed. I then have to uninstall a game to install an update to a game, then reinstall that game. Because it's not 15 gig of space, because it's swapping files out that's already there. So it doesn't actually take up that much more space. It just seemingly requires, because it's not well designed. The update systems are poorly designed. Those are the things they should be fixing. Why are we not compressing files for download like we used to do? Why is that a thing that's not happening these days? Why am I downloading over 100 gigabytes of data? Why isn't that compressed? Again, answers on a postcard. That needs to change. Why are updates to games that require you to purchase a season pass or the individual expansion, why are those files downloaded to my computer or my console when I haven't bought them? That needs to stop. These are things that you don't need, by the way, a new generation of consoles to fix. But these are the things that people want an end to. People are fed up of it. Playing games now is a hassle. It's a project, when it shouldn't be. I don't want to have nearly half of my games collection sat on the shelf, uninstalled because I don't have the room. I should not have to ever be buying more storage when I have all of that storage available. It shouldn't be a thing. But these are things they won't fix. What they'll do is, it'll be, well, this can now do 4K at 120 frames per second, or 8K at 60 frames per second. Nobody cares about 8K, by the way. Nobody. People are still only just getting onto 4K. So that would be a complete waste of resources. And there's very few games will even take advantage of that. So that would be pointless. But they'll flog that out there as a selling point. This is the problem that you have. They won't fix the thing that people want fixing. Because as I've said, that doesn't require a new console. These are things that can be fixed in a firmware update and policy changes with the various software companies that basically deploy ransomware on your consoles when you install a game. So, that's why I say I just don't think there's a need for another generation. Not yet. I think you could easily get another 4 years, 5 years with what you've got. And I think people would still, if you've got the games and the games are good, people will buy the games, because nobody really wants, the average person doesn't want to have to spend hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pounds on new tech, believe it or not. Not when what they've got is okay. What gamers want are games. If you look at what's doing well, game-wise, it's not the stuff that requires you to have a NASA-powered rig. It doesn't require that. The games that sell well aren't even the most visually intensive games that require all of that technology. That's not what's happening. That's not what we're getting. So, to sort of sum up this point, I don't think it's a requirement. I don't think there's a desire for it. I think people just want games. They want the next Elder Scrolls game. They want good games. Give them that. Give them that. Now I understand, especially from Sony's perspective, as primarily a hardware company, they need to make a new console to sell. I get that. That's Sony's problem though, that they have to solve. And I don't think it will do them well to have an expensive console that doesn't sell. I don't think that will do them well. People will just go elsewhere, or they'll stick with what they've got and run that until they stop making games for it. And as we saw with the PS4 was still getting games made years into the PS5's life cycle. There wasn't the chop-off point that there was previously. So I do think that's going to be I think that's going to be the big problem. You've got to come out with something that's reasonably priced to draw people in. And I think at the moment, that's just not going to be there. They've got stuck into a trap of expectation versus reality. And I think in there is the problem that they're going to continue to have going forward with whatever they do with the PS6. So we'll see. Ooh. So I think I'm going to talk about the Bond game and this wider thing of this phrase, modern audiences, that is such a triggering phrase. I did talk about it a little bit before I got into this, but I'm going to do it now. I wanted to keep my ducks in a row, and I kind of got out of sync with everything, so I'm going to redo it now and articulate the point better than when I started. So there was I don't know where it come from. It was on X. I don't know whether it was a legitimate source. These days you have to be careful because, with the fact that there seems to be an issue with regards to the reliability of things on the internet these days. I don't trust anything, but any event, apparently a source from IO Interactive that are making the new James Bond game have said that they're going to change up things with Bond to reflect an audience. This is always a sort of red flag for me. Two things. Why? Bond is an accepted character that's been around now for what, over 60 years. Everybody knows what the character of Bond is, love him or hate him. I would say that the success of the Bond franchise down the decades has meant that the majority like him, like the character. Whether you want to describe him as a throwback or throw any other slurs at the character, yes, he was a product of the time, but that doesn't mean to say that you may need to change that character for a mythical entity called the modern audience. Now, why do I call the modern audience a mythical entity? Well, what is it? You know, what is the modern audience? What actually does it entail? Well, a modern audience to me, it's like a phrase where it's not so much an audience, but it's a set of values that the writers think that everybody in the world should adhere to. So they like to deconstruct classic heroes from the past. They like to break them down and either completely destroy them or rebuild them in an image that they feel that the rest of that everybody in the world should aspire to. The problem with that, and this has been born out of the abject failure of many projects that have been written and targeted towards this mythical modern audience. There's a reason why it fails, and that's because the modern audience that they believe exists doesn't. That doesn't exist. Here's how I'm going to put it. Bond has been around for, as I say, nearly 60 years. Bond in the 90s, with Pierce Brosnan, was generally well received. The movies, I can't quote chapter and verse on the box office, but they kept making them, so they must have done okay. The movies are, I think there's probably some people don't like. There's some people do like. GoldenEye, I think generally speaking, is a well-liked movie. I like it. It did well. Now, the character of the environment changed. The threat to Bond changed. It was no longer the Cold War. The Soviet Union had collapsed. So in terms of adversaries, it changed from that perspective. It ceased to be a Cold War thriller and sort of embraced the issues of what was then the modern day. But the character of Bond was still the same. You know, he was a clean-cut action guy. Women wanted to be with him, men wanted to be him. That kind of was the tagline that was always attached to Bond at that period of time. That didn't change. Now, at that point, you're talking of nearly 30 years away from his inception, from his cinematic debut. So, what changed? Nothing much, really. The adversaries did, the plot lines did, and the character was pretty much still intact. So there was the modern audience that they were writing for then? Probably not. Probably not. They were just keeping the character of Bond and putting him into a more modern world of threats. But he was still Bond. Pierce Brosnan's Bond was still Bond. And it worked. Talk about video games. GoldenEye, one of the best console first-person shooters of all time, generally accepted. But the point is, if they were making Bond for the modern audience back then, and it did well, what was the modern audience? What was it? Was it young people? Well, I was in my 20s then. I would have been that target audience. I didn't have a problem with the fact that the character of Bond was what anyone would describe as being a throwback to the past. No, that's what I expected. That's what I enjoyed. That was the story. There were other films that had different sort of more modern male type people in them, but the classic characters remain the same because that's how they were written. You can't be a fan of something and then when you get the opportunity to create something in that world, you then change it. You then change characters. You know, you then deconstruct the character to do whatever it is that you wish to do with it. You know, whether you're doing this to deconstruct the character to rebuild it or to destroy it completely. The point is, you're not a fan of it if you do that. None of the people that wrote the characters in Star Wars were fans of Star Wars. J.J. Abrams, Rian Johnson are not Star Wars fans. Why do I say that? Because they destroyed characters that were beloved from the original trilogy. You're not a fan of something if you destroy it, by the very definition. They may say that they are, but they're not. They're people that have held a deep-seated resentment to those characters and wanted to change them. And presented with the opportunity, that's the first thing that they did. And this is the case with Bond. If they're going to do what they say they're going to do, and again, I'm saying if, you're not a fan of it, you hate it, and you want to change it. Because there is no such thing as a modern audience. It's a mythological construct. Like I say, it's their modern values, it's the creators' modern values. That's what they're talking about. Their personal beliefs. That's what they mean by the modern audience. People want what they want in their entertainment, and it's not that. It's not that. It's not those values. They don't respond to it. And it's because you're taking established characters that people love and are fans of, and you're changing them. And that's not what people want. You know what they want. When somebody goes to watch a Bond movie or play a Bond game or read a Bond book, they know what they want. They want the character that Sir Ian Fleming wrote. That's what they want. Now, you can have different threats, that's fine. You know. But by and large, people know what they want. And when you change these things up, people resist it. They go, well, I'm not going to invest in it. I'm not going to watch this thing. I'm not going to get into that. And that doesn't mean to say that they are intolerant or that they're bigoted. It's just that they know what they want. They want a certain set of tick boxes from a franchise that's already been long established, with characters that have already been established. When you change that, you're going to meet resistance from people because you're not giving them what they want. And you're not a fan of that thing if you destroy it. You're not. And this is really where I'm at with it. I do think there may have been a degree of pressure or instruction passed down from Amazon, which now owns the Bond license, which doesn't bode well, really, does it, for future movie versions of Bond? But there's just been a litany of failures. Create something new. I'm nothing against that. If you want to have a character that behaves in a particular way that reflects your values, create that character. Don't dip into the past and take an established character and then completely change it to suit your particular set of values. It's lazy. And that's all there is to it. And that's pretty much all I have to say on that. You're not a fan. You don't like it. You want to create something of your own. What you do is you take something that's already been established, already created, and has already got a built-in fan base, and you go in there and completely ruin it for those people that enjoyed it. And then when they complain, you criticize them. That's not right. There's a couple of crows attacking each other. That's not right. Stick to what the character is. If you don't like it, create your own or leave well alone. But don't destroy something that other people have enjoyed for decades just because you want to do your thing with it. But that's all I've got to say on that. I'm going quite a long walk today. It won't be reflected in the video, but yeah, I just wanted to articulate that. You create what you want, but don't ruin something that's already been created and that has a built-in fan base, and not give what those fans want and then complain about it when they push back. So anyway, we'll call it there. I'll probably be around tomorrow. I don't know yet, but if so, I will see you then. And yeah, I will catch you all later.